Donald M. Ware. He's born in Richmond, raised in Arlington, Virginia. He has a BS in mechanical engineering from Duke University in 1957. You have an MS in nuclear
engineering.
Engineering. Air Force Institute of Technology. Is that right? Okay. In 1970. 26-year service in the United States Air Force as a pilot, teacher, staff scientist, test manager, programs manager at the headquarters of United States
Europe.
USA of Europe, okay? And he flew F-105s for 7 years, and he'll explain what that is. 2 combat tours, then he retired in 1983. He began studying UFOs when he saw the highly publicized lights over Washington, D.C. in 1952. Did you know that? Okay. In 1984, he was appointed Florida State Director for the Mutual UFO Network. In 1989, he was elected Eastern Regional Director for the Mutual UFO Network, and he now lives in Fort Walton Beach with his wife, Carol. So, without further ado, now, I know it's exactly on time, I present to you Lieutenant Ware. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Very much. Okay. We can have that.
Should have given him that earlier.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm a little challenged here by the podium that is especially designed to cause everything to slip off onto the floor. It has no ledge on. I only have one visual aid I want to show you right now. This I was handed by a retired member of the National Reconnaissance Officer at one of our recent international conferences. He told me that this is Haunebu 5. And Haunebu 1 was made in Germany prior to 1938. Haunebu 5, I understand, was made in an underground facility in the Antarctic, which was Neuschwabenland, is now delineated as Melchizedek territory in www.melchizedek.com. Made by U.S., German, and Aldebaran scientists. And I think this thing can go to the moon or Mars or wherever. I think it can. I don't know if y'all want to get a better look at that. I think this is true. I think this is how they release information to us. This, I'm sure, is not a photograph. I think it's a computer representation. 3 days later, after I'd shown appreciation for the picture, he came up and handed me a big poster that has this object hovering over Stonehenge. And you can see the reflection of Stonehenge when you turn it upside down in this thing. In bold letters this high down the bottom it says, "I know and I believe." That's all it says. When I have my monthly meetings, I put that over a picture in my living room. It's a nice setting. Okay. A little personal information about my own experiences. I was 50 years old before I realized that my flying dreams at age 5 were probably out-of-body experiences. I was 55 before I realized that it was probably messages from my spirit guides when at age 18, Duke University, Ramdekai House, after a philosophical discussion until midnight. I went to bed midnight, woke up at 2 o'clock with all this information in my mind. I had to just get up and write down. Wrote down a full page. And it said I only had one ambition, and that's to be the happiest man in the world. And what it takes to make me happy is a little more than my share of love, excitement, and self-satisfaction. And then I described in a paragraph in detail what those 3 things meant. And I took this to heart, and so I had a great advantage over most people in that I've known what I've been looking for all my life. So once you figure that out, you know you can make more progress. And I was at a decision point in my life at that time whether I was going to make a commitment to the U.S. Air Force. Because, you know, I would get a commission and a degree at the same day, And I had to decide whether I was going to make that commitment for the last 2 years into college. And I decided, gee, you know, there's ample opportunity for love, excitement, self-satisfaction as an Air Force officer. So I chose that route. And that's the only thing that allowed me to retire at age 47 and not have to work for a living. I decided that, I'd figured out by then that the happiest people were the people that had the right combination of time and money. And by age 47, I'd worked myself into a position where I had 100% of my time to do whatever I did and enough money to do it. So that was kind of neat. And I decided that I would not charge for anything that I said or anything that I wrote. So I do carry a briefcase full of stuff with me with some interesting information for people that come to conferences and come see me, and if I got anything left, I'll give it to you. I skipped the time when I was 16 walking down the street in Washington, or Arlington, Virginia, and saw 7 star-like objects, red light type UFOs. And my thought was, gee, is that the same thing I read about in last Sunday morning's paper? And after 10 minutes, nothing else was happening, so I went in, went to bed, and got up next morning, and the paper had headlines, flying saucers. They made headlines around the world. 2 Saturday nights in a row, the guys in those UFOs put on a demonstration that the media could not ignore and the government could not cover up. And I think that's the reason they did it. They thought it was time that we took one little step in our awareness of the alien presence, and the term flying saucer showed up around the world. I met 6 people in the Air Force who had seen them up close that I knew would lie to me, so that kind of built up my views on the subject. When I retired, I went into studying ancient astronaut stuff. I had more time to read, and I realized that somebody's been watching us for a very long time, and I realized that the UFO phenomenon and religions were both avenues through which we could have got a glimpse of a much larger reality. And I asked myself, what other avenues might I find to learn about the larger reality? And I decided probably all the persistent mysteries of mankind fit that bill, so I set out to do a fairly decent literature search on reincarnation, telepathy, out-of-body experiences, near-death experiences, spiritual healing. And it was in 1989 when the universe started cooperating in my education. But prior to this, I was primary investigator on the case of Ed Walters in Gulf Breeze. He had 22 encounters, including 18 separate photographic sessions in a 5.5-month period while our investigation was going on. Took pictures with every kind of camera we gave him. And I think those 42 pictures, he took 41 that he gave us early. One that he apparently did not remember taking, so he didn't tell us about it until many years later. But he took pictures of 3 different types of vehicles. Yes. Can y'all, is that mic on? I've got a mic. They can turn it up a little bit. Is that better? Yeah, I know the air conditioning down here is on, but it's not. People that come to UFO conferences put out more energy than a lot of people, I think, and that's what causes the heat to go up. But I'll try to keep my voice up. But he hopefully can keep the mic in the back up too, for those in the back. Otherwise, there are a couple of seats up front. If somebody's sitting in the back and is having a hard time hearing, they might want to move up to a more front seat. I see 2 of them right here in the middle. And we got a couple over here. By the way, Ed Walters continues to take pictures. They're coming and 3 feet above the ground in his backyard, 20 feet away from him in the middle of the day now. But he's not bothering to show them to people because he doesn't want to fight the debunkers anymore. He did show me a couple of them that did not get published in his 3rd book. He's written 3 books now. One is called The Gulf Breeze Sightings, one called UFO Abductions in Gulf Breeze, which has all the stuff in it. We told him to leave out of the first book because we thought the first book was about the pictures, and it might turn off some people who weren't ready for aliens yet. And then the 3rd book is called UFOs Are Real, Here's the Proof. He wrote with Dr. McAfee. In '89, I received 15 messages, didn't come directly to me, but they came through 7 other people using 3 different telepathic processes. And I started paying attention. They said things like, whether I fully recognize it or not, I have a mission to show people that science and spirituality are 2 sides of one coin. That our scientific community has very effectively separated the human body from the spirit, and that's not good. They should recognize we have a spirit. So a lot of my lectures have been oriented toward getting people to understand that study of the human spirit is a proper scientific endeavor. Unfortunately, some of the board members of MUFON didn't want to go that route. One said I should become a connoisseur of all types of telepathically acquired information, which I've tried to do. And I did, one of the books I read was Oahspe. Has anybody ever heard of Oahspe? O-A-H-S-P-E, Earth, Sky, and Spirit. Let me tell you briefly how this was acquired, because this is a really interesting story. A medical doctor in Midwest somewhere, maybe it was Illinois, 1871 was visited by an angel who said, would you do us a favor? And he said, what is the favor? Would you stop eating meat, fowl, and fish for 10 years? The doctor said, yeah, I think I can do that. You know, he was kind of on a spiritual path. And 10 years later, the angel came back and said, now go buy a typewriter. Typewriters had just been invented in the previous 10 years. As soon as he got his typewriter in his room, the angel came and said, now put your fingers on the keyboard. And something took control of his fingers and typed out several pages. He was told to put them face down beside the typewriter and don't look at them until he was told to. He was awakened 1 hour before sunrise every morning for the next 350 mornings until on the 15th of December of 1871. After typing 1,008 pages, he was told to read it and publish it. And that is the book Oahspe, published first in 1882. It is a history it's the history of this planet for the past 25,000 years, projected 100 years into the future, to the present times. There's a line drawn right across the middle of the page. Each chapter is, well, some of the chapters are like Apollo, son of Jehovah, you know, named after a particular god. And in each chapter, it tells what went on the surface of the planet during, apparently, the reign of that whoever that was, Apollo or whatever, Isis or... Above the line is the history of what was going on in the heavens associated with the planet during the same time period. Very interesting. But this is all post-Lucifer and Satan and stuff, so you don't get much of their, you know, their influence here. They had already been fired by Michael. Let's see, where I was. 1992, 28 January, I woke. 2 o'clock in the morning exactly on the LED clock with a video screen in my mind with 2 sentences on it. There was no room in my mind for any other thought until I got up and wrote down those 2 sentences. The first one said, as soon as I did, my mind cleared, I could think about other things, go back to this is a paranormal event, clairvoyant event. First one said, unconditional love is becoming the driving force on this planet. The second one said, I am trying to learn to express unconditional love. And I, shortly after that, looked at that as probably confirmation from my spirit guides that I was on the right track in my thinking. 1 year later, I had a bedroom-type physical contact experience in which I was paralyzed, mostly paralyzed, couldn't open my eyes, couldn't speak, with something had a firm grip on my wrist. This wrist was under my thigh. This was the only one that was a threat to anybody out there. And that was an interesting, I think that was done, that was it, you know. As soon as I got concerned about, because my heart rate started slowly going faster and faster, and I got concerned about whether that was good for my health. And shortly after I thought that concern, the hand released. 2 seconds later, I could open my eyes, nothing there. spoke. My wife said something. She mumbled, didn't remember it. Anyway, I think they were just showing me the kinds of things that happen occasionally to people who have these bedroom experiences. And then in 93, let's see, I did see UFOs on 8 different occasions in Florida. Last one in 93 in Fort Walton Beach. I had 2 sightings in Pensacola, and I think 4 in Gulf Breeze, 4 or 5. 1996, I was at an Institute of Noetic Sciences conference. And as I got up from the table before I was going to the last lecture on Sunday, Joan Boriosenko, someone I'd never heard, she's a world-class teacher. I was really interested in taking notes like I do at conferences. This lady at the end of the table looked at me and with kind of this strange look and said, "You need to write poetry." I'm sure I looked at her with a blank stare because I know nothing about poetry, had no desire to ever write any. 5 minutes into that lecture, I flipped the page back and wrote natural science at the top of the page, followed by 12 lines of poetry. In less than 5 minutes, flipped it back and continued taking notes. And when I look at that, it's, wow, that's profound stuff. Never had any inclination to write poetry before or since. I think I was used as a channeler for 5 minutes, as a demonstration of what it's like, since I've been studying channelers for many years now. And then last summer I went to the Monroe Institute in Virginia, where they study consciousness using the hemisync process. Anybody aware of the hemisync process, where they put one tone in one ear and the other tone in the other ear? They have the difference of tones that matches your beta state heart rate, and then they can turn a dial and lower that difference in tones, and they can bring you right down and hold you at an alpha or a theta. They can put you to sleep easy if they want to.
Can you spell that
Hemisync, H-E-M-I-S-Y-N-K, or S, I think it's K. Sync? Hemisync. Anyway, they're expensive programs. It's $1,400 for a week, I think, but it's well worth it. It's a great group. There are 24 people from 7 countries, and I did experience at Focus 12. First I heard the buzz in the center of my head, which I'm sure is the same thing that Ed Walters described when it was his signal to go out and take pictures. He'd get this buzz in his head or hum in his head. Well, that's what it was. And then the next day at Focus 12, I heard my name called. First it sounded a bit in the distance, and it kind of perked me up, and then loud and clear right from the center of my head was the word Don. No mistaking. This is a demonstration of a clairaudient experience. And the next day at Focus 15, which they call the place of no time, in my meditations I was requesting information on past lives. And what I got, it was like I was maybe 10, 12 feet above the ground and cruising along about as fast as you would on a horse that was at a fast canter or maybe a slow gallop. And I was going down a narrow wooded valley on an unpaved road. And there was an archway that came up, had big sandstones like that stacked up with a round arch, maybe 15 feet across. Went zooming through that one, and then more trees and grass in the road, and another arch, and I went through that one, and I had the feeling I was in England for some reason. Didn't see any man-made anything, just a worn track in the valley. So maybe I had a past life in England. Since my ancestors came to America from Ware, England, I expect I did anyway. I ask for big steps and I get little steps in my consciousness. So I've had a number of paranormal experiences, and it just keeps getting more fun. And the next thing I want to do is tell you about Scott Jones, who put on the conference in Washington called When Cosmic Cultures Meet. This is what Bob really wanted me to do. I told him I wanted to speak on the subject, which I'm going to do in a little bit, on the subject of the rising culture joining a galactic society. Because 3 years ago, I was inspired to speak on that subject. when I read that phrase in Dr. Woodhouse's book called Paradigm Wars, the thought came into my mind, you have to write a book on this subject, the rising culture. And I take those hints, seriously, and so I always speak on a subject before I write on it. So this is what I'm doing. I'm speaking on the rising culture in preparation to write a book, which I hope to start real soon. Scott Jones, one of the most interesting gentlemen I have ever met, at least 10 years older than I am. And I'm going to be eligible for Medicare in a couple of months. He was a fighter pilot also. In 1953, he was flying Corsairs off of a carrier in Korea. Interdiction was the mission. They carried war materials in everything, ox carts, whatever. He was leading a flight of 2. Saw an ox cart with 2 guys in military uniform behind it and a couple people up front. An oxen rolled in, put his pipper on it, pulled the trigger. The 2 military guys dove off into the ditch on each side. His bullets went through the ox cart, hit the people and the oxen up front. As he pulled off, he realized what was in it. It was a coffin. Here's Mom and Dad taking their poor dead son out to bury him with his 2 Army buddies behind him, and he just blew him away. At that instant, the soul of that dead Korean soldier jumped into his cockpit with him, or that soldier who had left his dead body behind jumped into his cockpit with him and stayed with him all the way back to the carrier. This really got Scott's attention. The next day, he was up there on a mission. He saw a guy in uniform on the road, rolled in, put his pipper on him. He said, "I think I'll let that one live." Maybe he had a guilt complex. Pulled up, did a couple rolls, went back to the carrier. He realized he was playing God. He was deciding who was going to live, who was going to die. This got Scott on his spiritual path. A little while later, he saw a UFO up real close off the side of a ship. He was in Navy intelligence the last 14 years in his service career. I think he was associated with the CIA there for a while. And then he became a special assistant to Senator Claiborne Pell, a very service to others member of the Council on Foreign Relations. That's the U.S. branch of the world government we've been living under for 78 years. Pell Grants to allow poor kids to get a college education. And his job allowed him to meet everybody in Washington you needed to know to make things happen. And he had the time to go around the world to psychic research conferences and UFO conferences and come back and report to Claiborne Pell. And Lawrence Rockefeller took a real liking to him. And in 1993, Lawrence said, well, actually maybe before that, Lawrence said, "When you are ready to give me 100% of your time, let me know." So in 93, he formed the Human Potential Foundation with Claiborne Pell. And Lawrence gave him $1 million to set it up. And he said, once he had it done, he said, "Okay, Lawrence, I'm ready. What do you want me to do?" He said, "I want you, Clinton had just been elected. I want you to talk the Clinton administration into releasing previously classified information about the alien presence." Scott's a very capable man, and I think he was very successful in making that happen. However, everything that was released, and I certainly understand why, was released covertly. The policy is to put information into the public domain so it's available for those seeking it without being forced on those who aren't ready for it. Because believe me, most people are not ready for aliens. You people in this room are. There's a seat right there and one right here in the front row if you want it. I think you folks are part of that fourth density society I've been talking about. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here. I think because of Scott's efforts, you know, one of the first things he did is he brought a number of my friends, UFO investigators like Linda Howe, into Scott's Ranch in Grand Teton Valley there. I read the agenda for that meeting. The questions were like, what would the public reaction would be if the government released certain information about the alien presence? Or what would the public reaction be if foreign governments released certain information about the alien presence? And the last one was, what is your personal perspective on the spiritual aspects of what's going on? Linda told me she spent 2 hours one-on-one with Lawrence Rockefeller on that. I expect Scott was around. Then Scott published something called the Matrix of Beliefs, which covered every oddball, wild idea you have ever heard of concerning this subject. And he even lectured on that at a Project Awareness conference in Tampa. He agreed to lecture once for each of 5 different UFO organizations, including the Institute of New Sciences or whatever, that I think Stonier heads now, and MUFON. All very good, all different lectures. But I think because of his efforts, we saw the alien autopsy film. The film is real. Everything said about it is disinformation. It's not the Roswell alien. It's probably not an autopsy. It's a dissection rather than an autopsy. We got to see the live alien, or the alien interview film. That's real. Everything Victor said about it is disinformation. It's not from Area 51. It's not 1988. It's much, much earlier. But the film is real. You know, dead aliens are not as frightening as live aliens. Dead aliens from 50 years ago are not as frightening as dead aliens from now. And if you see a live alien, you might as well watch him die on camera. You know, Bill Burns called that alien snuff porn. That movie. I don't know, how many of you have seen it on Encounters? You know, it's been shown several times on television. We got to see Special Operations Manual 101, published in Stanton Friedman's Majestic 12 book. That, you know, I don't know, has Linda lectured here at this group? Because Linda was used to help verify that. And because of Linda, it got published in Stanton's book, I think. But the people of Berliner first got that, and it was kept secret by the Fund for UFO Research and MUFON folks who are working on it. Bob Wood was trying to duplicate it on his computer, and he sent a copy to his son Ryan up in San Francisco from San Diego. That copy he put in the mail in San Diego showed up in Linda Howe's mailbox. That's a demonstration that whoever it is that controls our mails for UFO investigators, researchers, etc., can not only make things disappear, but they can reroute things to people they want to get them, because MUFON and FUFOR were not making the information public, and that's why they gave it to us. They thought it was time for us to see it. They knew Linda Howe would make it public, so they gave it to her, and she made it. She lectured in Tampa right after that, told us all about it. We got to see 2 pieces of hardware, one that she was given, one that Daryl Sims was given. And Daryl Sims's hardware was investigated by National Institute for Discovery Science. They had a media interview at a media conference at the 50th anniversary of the Roswell conference, the Roswell crash, where they said that this is extraterrestrial material because 5 elements are not of this earth by isotopic ratios. That's pretty profound stuff. Even for the Third Density Society, they might pay attention to that. Here's some ET material on this planet, manufactured somewhere else besides here. And the people who supported, this is my view now, the people who supported Scott Jones in all of this, caused major media, who are all controlled by the Council on Foreign Relations, or owned by the Council on Foreign Relations, the board CEO and half dozen board members. They are the ones that built up the hype for the Roswell 50th anniversary. They wanted that to be a newsworthy event. It was time to make that a newsworthy, to put that into the third density society. And they used Time magazine to give us a picture of Homo Alterius Spacialis. They put him on the cover with 6 pages of information on the Roswell 50th anniversary behind it, designed, you know, for the audience of Time magazine rather than this audience. It's pretty mild for this audience, but I think it was appropriate for the Time magazine audience, most of which have no need to know anything about the alien presence because of their spiritual reason for being. And then Scott put on in actually it was before that, Scott put on the Cosmic Cultures Conference. Now here's I don't see a red light on this thing. Is it really working? You are getting it, okay. Here's a flyer that Scott put out on this. His primary premise was, it's time to stop arguing about the evidence of the alien presence and start talking about how it affects all aspects of our society. And the people that he invited, Bill Clinton, this is March 1995, I think. He invited Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton, a lot of UN people, Carl Sagan, all those folks representing government to come and speak at this conference. Every one of them turned him down except a guy named George S. Robinson, who I think represents world government, because he was a legal counsel for the National Research Council. He was the first man to get a PhD in civil law relating to space. National Research Council I view as the world government's scientific advisory board. He is assistant counsel to the Smithsonian Institute, another world government organization, legal consultant to NASA, etc. He's got the right credentials. And he came to this conference, and he talked on, the title was Homo Alterius Spacialis, the interdependence between extraterrestrials and Earthkind. No mistaking what that's about, right? What he said is you cannot take any national law into space. You have to figure out what the cosmic laws or the natural laws are. You have to figure out what the laws are that pertain to us up there, to aliens down here, and to human-alien hybrids here, there, and everywhere. In fact, I was so excited about what he said that I talked Bob Brown into inviting him to come to speak at our International UFO Congress, which happened about 2 years ago. And Scott Jones also came and spoke. Robinson's talk there was on, the title was Space Law and Astro Law, and what he said was, we humans have already made a new subspecies, Homo sapiens alterius, and a new species, Homo Alterius Spacialis. And we did it to make us more survivable in off-planet conditions. He mentioned the moon and Mars and I think Europa. And this is pretty daggone profound stuff. But he said it with enough legalese, and he mentioned no aliens, and everybody in the room, you know, knew that the hybridization program, there were aliens involved in this. In fact, most of them think of it as an alien program. I've been trying to convince them it's a joint human-alien program. And you're welcome. But here's a guy representing world government in my mind telling us, the UFO conference, 500 people, that or maybe there were only 250 or so in the room, it was the first thing early in the morning, that we did it. That's pretty profound. And I think that face on the cover of Time magazine is Homo Alterius Spacialis. This is our hybrid offspring who look so different from us. Their human parents are not allowed to raise them because their friends and neighbors would not accept them. I mean, we have enough problem with accepting of people that look a little different from others anyway. So accepting someone like Powder. How many of you saw the movie Powder on Fox last night? Didn't it? You know,
What's the name of it again?
Powder. Powder, yes. I think that is an example of Homo Alterio Spacialis, and it showed you why they can't live on the surface of this planet. They have to live in our underground and undersea bases, our bases on the moon and Mars. And that picture of the UFO I showed you, which I hope is still up here somewhere, I'm sure that can go to the, you know, back and forth to those places. Okay, other speakers of this conference were William Baldwin, who from the Center of Human Relations, Richard Borland, I'm sure most of you know, clinical psychologist, James Deardorff, Professor Emeritus of Atmospheric Sciences, Oregon State, Keith Farrell, Vice President, Editor of Omni, James Fernero, PhD, Anthropology at Cabrillo College, Jerome Glenn, Executive Director, American Council of the United Nations, for the United Nations University Futurist, Michael Hessman, fellow member, board member of the International UFO Congress from Germany, David Hunt, a international lecturer and researcher, James J. Hertog, who wrote The Keys of Enoch, most of you know about him, Jaime Maussan, from, you know, the TV journalist from Mexico, James Moore, professor in anthropology, University of California, San Diego, Ruth Montgomery, who was on my panel. I was asked by him to host or to moderate the panel on Hope that had Ruth Montgomery and Dr. Leo Sprinkle and Richard Borland on it. We had a good time. John L. Peterson, president of the Arlington Institute, a D.C. Beltway, I think I see some associations in the world government there. They call him a futurist. Magnificent person. George Robinson, Dennis Roatman, don't know him, but Elizabeth Sahtouris, futurist researcher, author of Gaia, The Human Journey from Chaos to the Cosmos. John Salter, I've heard him lecture a few times. He's from the University of North Dakota. Sun-Chi Lee, who heads the world's largest UFO organization, 30,000 people in China, most all with PhDs from the universities. And a shaman from Peru, Zacharias Sitchin, Leo Sprinkle, Charles Tart, Professor Core Faculty, Institute of Transpersonal Psychology, Paula Underwood, Turtle Woman singing lecturer, and myself, whom he billed as a says MS Nuclear Engineering, spiritual political researcher and lecturer. Fort Walton Beach. I was told that this was printed in some hundred and some thousand copies, and these were mailed to people all over the world. Part of the effort was to get this in the hands of people around the world, to let them know that there's serious attention being made to this subject. And then they had a real nice brochure with bigger write-ups on people here. There were so many interesting things that went on there. For example, they, before I forget it, let me tell you what he said about me in the write-up here. He said, besides Air Force officer, UFO investigator, environmental activist, raised in Arlington, Virginia, gave my degrees. With diverse interests and studies, he lectures on UFOs and human-alien interactions, the long-term government covert educational program on UFOs, telepathic communications and UFO phenomenon, paths to world government, and how an engineer, fighter pilot, and staff scientist became a light worker. He has seen craft of cosmic cultures on 8 occasions. Where was I?
About the Homo Salon.
I probably, this senior moment I'm having is probably an indication I really need to get on with the next part of my talk. And we'll have a Q&A session at the end. So I think you've got some flavor of Scott Jones. Oh, his parting words. No, one of the things that happened is he said he had 3 panels, one on fear, one on hope, and one on the future. And he asked the people who registered to send in a question for one of these 3 panels, or one for each. And then the heads of the panel, me for the hope panel, would take the questions and prioritize them with the help of the other people on the panel and find out which is the #1 best question. So I took the best 6, made copies, gave them to the other people, and had them prioritize them 1 through 6 and added up all the numbers, and I came out with the #1 question. And at the end, the question was about, when we humans negotiate about the future of this planet, are we negotiating for just us, or are we negotiating for all the plants and the animals and the whole planet? So I at the bar that night, I met the lady that sent that question in, and I congratulated her on what a good question she had, and she says, that wasn't my question. She says, my guides gave me that one, which I thought was interesting. But anyway, it got her a reimbursement of her $295 for the fee conference for the fee for the conference. Now, and he also had us all sing Amazing Grace with a few added words. It was the most impressive thing. Couldn't believe it. I mean, you really got choked up about it. Now I want to talk about the rising culture, joining a galactic society. I've done this in an hour before, so I think I can make it. Many of you know that there is a process to change. It starts with a thought, and then you put that thought into words, and then you're ready to take the actions that bring about the change. That's the way it works, right? Well, my first thought on this term, the rising culture, I think I mentioned came when I read it in Dr. Woodhouse's book. And that's why I'm speaking on it. So we as a species make our future through our thoughts, words, and deeds. So we really ought to think about what we want for the 21st century. There are a lot of other people doing that, by the way. The main effort is taking place, I think, through the State of the World Forums, which started in 1995 and will next be in 4 to 10 September in New York City. We should also recognize that some of our world leaders have been doing that at least since 1921, when the Council on Foreign Relations was formed. I mean, a lot of you folks have had paranormal events, involved with higher intelligence, guided by your spirit guides or whatever. It happens to the people with a lot of influence in this planet too. The people that have the money and the influence to bring about major change. And I can give you many examples of it. One of the biggest changes is caused by Gorbachev, President Gorbachev in 1985 and 86, what happened to him. I hope I have time to tell you that story if I don't ask me a question about it in the Q&A session. I think that some of these leaders are really getting guidance from above, just like you and I have. So I want to talk about 4 subjects. Changing ways of knowing. Institutional changes that bring about globalization. Changes in our physical bodies. And an example of government on a neighboring planet, as written in paper number 72 of the Urantia book. How many of you have seen the Urantia book? Anybody read it from cover to cover? You read it from cover to cover. Good for you. Very good. I asked that question to 500 people one time. 50 people raised their hand and said they have owned or currently own the book. 6 of them had read it from cover to cover. Our changing ways of knowing is perhaps a misnomer, because some are old ways of knowing that we're just learning to understand better now. For example, clairvoyance, or inner seeing, and clairaudience, inner hearing. I think that these two processes were involved in much of the prophecy included in various religious texts, and perhaps the Greek oracles use these two and the process now used by Dolores Cannon, where some other intelligence speaks through the voice box of the subject, who is usually in an altered state of consciousness. Any of you are familiar with the books of Dolores Cannon? Her last one is wonderful. A lot of new information in that, even for the long-term serious UFO researcher. Or we might just receive a thought, which we might look at as intuition. Then there's telepathic dictation, where a whole stream of thoughts are typed by the conscious or the unconscious mind of some person for publication. And I think this is a new process that started back in 1881 when John Newbrough typed the Waspy book, which I told you about. An older version of this process, I think, was used by Muhammad when he was given all 78,000 words of the Quran to speak to the scribes. Now, Muhammad was illiterate. So when he sat in the cave and listened to this stuff coming from Gabriel or somebody, and went out and spoke these words to the scribe, and they were all written down to form the Quran over a period of 20 years or so, it was better accepted as the Word of God. The latest process I've heard about seems to be the thought ball that Jim Marrs speaks about and has been taught to decipher by the aliens. His book's going to be out on that real soon now, I think, Jim Marrs. And Prudence Calabrese, who receives thought balls from the little gray dude, she calls him, that she met in her bathroom at 2 o'clock in the morning for, 2 years or so. Y'all familiar with Prudence and her effort? Very interesting story. Marcia Schaefer, in her talk and book, calls them holographic communication. Other methods of expanding our non-local awareness are remote viewing, controlled out-of-body experiences, and instrumented transcommunication, trying to eliminate the human mind from the communication process altogether. We get messages from both aliens and angels. We are each spiritual beings. The message sent to a number of Americans in the 1950s was, don't mess with nuclear weapons. They're dangerous. They affect things outside of this planet. Some nations have finally gotten the message and some haven't. Messages given to many people more recently are published in the Omega Project, Dr. Kenneth Ring's study of UFO abductees and people who've had near-death experiences. He says that these different types of experiences cause both groups to show more environmental concern and more spiritual awareness. Now, this subject of spiritual awareness brings me to the Urantia book, A Revelation for Humanity. It's a subtitle. Revelation is another way of knowing for those people willing to accept it. We don't have a problem about not having enough information in the public domain about the alien presence. We have a problem about our inability to accept that which has been given to us already. This book is a copy of 196 papers, coordinated papers from at least 21 authors transmitted telepathically between 1934 and 1935. Here, this is the 1996 edition, which I recommend. You can get it on barnesandnoble.com. You can't get it. It's, it's published for cost, and so Amazon.com can't carry it because they advertise a 30% discount on everything. But it's about God and universe destiny, the cosmos, life after death, angels and other celestial personalities, the history of Earth, evolution, Adam and Eve, development of civilization, spirituality, the last 690 pages on the life of Jesus, the human and divine Jesus, the missing years, his remarkable teachings. Wonderful book. I love the Bible stories, but hearing, it's called the Urantia book, U-R-A-N-T-I-A.
By whom? By whom?
It was acquired telepathically by a Chicago group in 1934 and 35. The names of the authors are not important. The importance is what's in the book. The names of the authors are not publicized or known anywhere except to a select group in the fellowship, I think.
Well, we just asked for the Urantia book.
The Urantia book, A Revelation for Mankind. Yep. It's published in many languages. It's been, it's published in 1955. U-R-A-N-T-I-A. The Urantia book is finally, the latest copy. The reason I say don't get the 55 version is because you need a book stand to hold it. It was 2,097 pages. And they've got it on thinner paper. They got more words on the page. You can hold it in your lap without getting too tired. Because the latest issue is only 1,846 pages, plus 35 pages of index. But let me warn you, this is a very difficult book. That's why so many people have not been able to get to it. You have to treat this as a PhD level correspondence course on the universe, and dedicate 1 year of your life, of serious reading time of your life, to getting through that book. Don't skip around, start at the beginning. If you read the last 690 pages on the life of Jesus before you read the beginning, you won't get the background that'll help you appreciate those 690 pages. You won't really understand that Jesus, the one who incarnated here as Jesus, was the Archangel Michael, and what big role he plays in the universe. I mean, when he fired Lucifer and Satan 200,000 years ago, he was the head of the local star system. Star systems have on the average 1,000 planets with intelligent life. This star system only had 607 planets with intelligent life at that, all of which were seeded by higher intelligence. And one of the requirements for Jesus, for Michael to be promoted, to be the sovereign of a local universe, our universe of Nebadon, which has 100 star systems in it, is to experience a lifetime in each of the 7 levels of awareness, or 7 levels of consciousness that exist in the universe. We are at the lowest level. He had already experienced those other 6 levels above us, and he needed to live a lifetime as he chose this planet to have that lifetime on, because we had suffered the double whammy of the Lucifer rebellion, followed by, that's 200,000 years ago, followed by the mission of Adam and Eve being cut short because of her mistake. And she broke a rule which they were serious about, and so they removed the tree of life from the Garden of Eden, and they knew then their physical bodies they lost their immortality, their godlike status, and eventually died. I think it's very touching that Adam, when he realized what had happened, that she had had a child by a Nodite prince instead of him, which is against the rules. But she did it for a good reason. She did it because the Nodites were not accepting representatives from the Garden of Eden, the Adamites, as an ambassador to their people. And they were the smartest tribe on the planet at that time. They were the descendants of Nod from the aliens left over from Caligastia when Lucifer and Satan got fired. Anyway, it's a really interesting story about what's going on there. Anyway, Jesus incarnated here to have a personal ministry to demonstrate how to live a Christ-like life as a head of a household, and then to have a public ministry which happened after his baptism. The Bible only tells us about his public ministry and doesn't tell us all the details about that. But this book tells you about his personal ministry and his public ministry, which he wanted to keep separate, by the way. Wonderful stories in that book. More preachers need to read that book. Really, they'll appreciate what's going on a lot better if they do. Anyway, the cover price is $19.99. It's probably, it's made available for cost. Barnes & Noble might, that's what they had to pay for it, so they're gonna up it 10-15% or so. I think Barnes & Noble charges $25 or something. But you can all afford it. It's worth it. It says that there are 7 trillion planets with intelligent life. 7 superuniverses, each with 10 major sectors, each with 100 minor sectors, each with 100 local universes, each of those having 100 constellations, each with 100 star systems, each with an average of 1,000 planets with intelligent life. Now, 7 trillion is a number that most people cannot comprehend when you're talking about the national debt, when you're just talking about dollars, much less planets with intelligent life. That's why a lot of people can't get past the first 300 pages of that book. Well, if you can't accept it now, you need to develop a large mental hole basket and just store that away somewhere until you're ready to figure out what to do with it. But I think it is exactly what it says, a revelation for mankind. Concerning mankind, it says that, I don't know the exact number, 930,000 years ago or so, a set of twins were born to the same parent, to parents of the most intelligent tribe of, I guess it was Homo erectus in the northeast corner of Africa. The tribe knew they were different, they knew they were different. And after puberty, when they were, at this time, they were living in caves on the ground. In the daytime, they were living in tree houses at night. They had a tree house up to the northwest. And when they figured it was time to leave, they just took all their prized possessions, the tree house, came down early the next morning and left the tribe. Interbred with each other and built up a tribe of increased genetics for the purpose of increasing our capacity for intellectual growth and spiritual awareness. And let's see, I want to add here that Urantia is known on neighboring planets as the world of the cross because of what we did to Jesus. See, a lot of these are fourth density societies who do have contact with higher intelligence, and they know all the stories about what happens to the leaders of their society too, Michael, and I thought that was an interesting note. Another quote from the book on page 514 says, "The planetary variations in the system life types result from the decisions of the life carriers." It says 500,000 years ago, 6 colored races suddenly appeared on this planet. I think suddenly appeared is the word they use for genetically engineered. Among the 19 children of the Sangik family in the mountains of northwest India. This is a time when the descendants of Andon and Fanta, those first 2 twins, had been fighting each other and dying of disease and stuff, and they had been reduced down to about 100 people. And has anybody talked to the people in here and see if they can figure out how to keep this room cooler? Somebody might know a trick, opening doors or doing something.
Yeah.
I hope somebody's working on that.
I could go and ask them.
Is it cool back there? Yeah, well, I think the air conditioner works better back there, so if somebody's really suffering from the heat, move to the back. If you need to hear better, you might move up front or something. I don't know. I hate to see people uncomfortable, but, you know, we try to do the best we can. They say that they seed these these 6 colored races at some point in the evolution of life on planets in the same order on all the planets. And the red man is the first. And the red man, they give genes that cause them to be rather aggressive because they're the ones that have to go out and face all the wild animals and survive. You know, they can't, you know, genetically engineer all these guys and have them get eaten by the lions or whatever. So they got, some of them went to the prime real estate on this planet around the Mediterranean, and some went up into Asia. In fact, those up in Asia, quite a few of them went up in Asia, and their population built up. The orange race was the next. They call it a secondary race, and some of those went down around the Mediterranean and a few elsewhere, and they interbred with the red man. And then the next was the yellow man, and some went to the Mediterranean, some went to Asia, and the population in Asia started ballooning. Their genes were such they were less aggressive. When they built up into different tribes, they didn't fight each other and kill each other off as much. So eventually the population pressure from the yellow man in Asia is what forced the red man across the isthmus into North America. When the glacier came up and when the glacier came back down, it blocked them off. And so the red man was pretty well separated from the rest of society. That is, the purer of the red genes, everybody by then was a hybrid of some sort, you know, eventually. And the next race they called the, did I mention the green one? Another secondary race that's now extinct. And the next one they called the blue race, which I think was named for eye color rather than skin color. Because they said that many of them, although some went to the Mediterranean too, many of them went up into the northwest, up into the Scandinavian countries. And then they call it the indigo race, I think, which is where most of the black skin color comes from. And a lot of them went to the Mediterranean and, you know, interbred with all the other races. And you know what happens when you mix all the colors? You end up with brown. That's why you got so many different shades of brown around the Mediterranean. And, you know, if there are any of the original black genes left on this planet, I think everybody's a hybrid. But I think I met some of those closest to the original black race that are not extinct or absorbed into the other races by now. And they are the Maasai. Has any of you ever been to Africa and met the Maasai? Aren't they different? You listen to their culture, and their entire life is built around cattle. What they eat is the milk, the meat, and the blood of cattle, plus a few herbs. But that's it. They're carnivores, almost entirely, and their total reason for being seems to be to acquire any cattle owned by a non-Maasai, one way or another. I got the idea that there was less capacity for intellectual growth and spiritual awareness among the Maasai than any other people. I've traveled in 102 countries now. But just a little side note. Anyway, we're all hybrids, okay? and we're all a result of the mixture of these 6 different colored races. Well, the next race to be put on the planet was the violet race, and that was from the genetics of Adam and Eve. No, the next one was 200,000 years ago from Caligastia's staff. Here's what happened. The planetary princes 200,000 years ago, the people assigned to help the people of Earth improve their animal husbandry, agriculture, religion, you know, whatever, spirituality, whatever you want to call it, etc., government. They designed 100 physical bodies for these eternal spiritual beings, like we all are, to incarnate in, that were capable of interbreeding, but at a higher genetic capacity than the human tribes. And these were the gods of old who were interacting with us 200,000 years ago, during the times of Lucifer and Satan. And when Lucifer rebelled, Michael just fired him. You know, can't put a fallen angel in jail. You just fire him. You move their office. And Caligastia was one of the 37 that chose to go along with Lucifer and Satan. Now, what Lucifer did is he made a declaration of independence. He decided he would no longer follow the guidance of the hierarchy. And he was going to be the sovereign of the star system. He talked 37 of these leaders to go around with him. 60 of the 100 staff of Caligastia, our planetary prince at that time, living in a town called Dalmatia, between the Tigris and Euphrates. Sitchin has gathered a lot of stuff from that time, I think, talks about it. 60 of them chose the negative path, and Michael made them stay here. The other 40 went off to Jerusalem, which is the headquarters of the local star system, to finish their paradise journey. And they chose Nod as their leader. They became the Nodites, which are written about in the Bible, and they are the same thing that Sitchin writes about as the Nephilim. They are the Nodites. They are what was left on the planet when they lost their tree of life, which was their ability for their physical bodies to continue to live. That's when they were told to go out and breed with the daughters of man. Anyway, I get carried away on tangents like this when I probably shouldn't, so let me move on. 34,000 years ago, Adam and Eve came here, and they built up a population in a peninsula. There were 3 Gardens of Eden built, but the first one was in a peninsula in the Mediterranean when the Mediterranean was larger. It had a narrow neck. There were 2 walls built that had a lot of wild animals put in the middle to keep the barbaric, tribes out of the Garden of Eden while they were developing this kinder, gentler civilization. I think the term is same as what's going on right now, because we are developing a kinder, gentler civilization, and they have to live separated from us. We don't have a peninsula in the Mediterranean that other people can't get to, so they live in the underground and undersea system, and then our base is on the moon and Mars, and perhaps Europa. There's a lot of parallels in these upgrades in genetics, but we're right in the middle of one of those programs that we've been through many times in the past. It says that mortal man is not an evolutionary accident. In paper number 70, it says, managers of the universe manage our biological, intellectual, and spiritual upgrade. Capacity for intellectual growth and spiritual development is the goal. And every paragraph in the Urantia book is numbered, just like in the Bible. And when they rewrote it, every paragraph from the second edition is cross-referenced to every paragraph in the first edition. Let me read you just a little bit about Caligastia 100 after rebellion, because I think this gives us some insight into their society at the time, 200,000 years ago. When the final roll was called, the corporal members of the prince's staff were found to have allied themselves as follows. Van and his entire court of coordination had remained loyal. Ang and 3 members of the food council had survived. The board of animal husbandry were all swept into rebellion, as were all of the animal conquest advisors. Thad and 5 members of the educational faculty were saved. Nod and all of the Commission on Industry and Trade joined Caligastia. Hap and the entire College of Revealed Religion remained loyal with Van and his noble band. Lutt and the whole Board of Health were lost. The Council of Art and Science remained loyal in its entirety. But Tut and the Commission on Tribal Government all went astray. There were 40 out of the 100 saved, later to be transferred to Jerusalem where they resumed their paradise journey. I think I said that. And let's see, 60 members of planetary staff who went into rebellion, chose Nod as their leader, worked wholeheartedly for the prince, but soon discovered that they were deprived of the sustenance of the system life circuits, awakened to the fact that they had been degraded to the status of mortal beings. They were indeed superhuman, but at the same time material and mortal. In the effort to increase their numbers, Caligastia ordered immediate resort to sexual reproduction, knowing full well that the original 60 and their 44 modified Andonite associates were doomed to suffer extinction by death sooner or later. Here's a couple more quotes that I think are kind of neat. Um, 1,682 women were impregnated with Adam's life plasm. There would have been more if Eve had not decided to have a child by Nodite rather than Adam. Punishment was to have removed from the garden the energy source that prevented their physical bodies from aging. How am I doing on time? Okay. This is a paper I wanted to read a little bit from called The Acme of Material Development, because it's kind of a goal for us to shoot for, I think. Mortal creatures living on a sin-stricken, evil-dominated, self-seeking, isolated world such as Urantia, that's us, can hardly conceive of the physical perfection and intellectual attainment and the spiritual development which characterize these advanced epochs of evolution on a sinless sphere. The advanced stages of a world settled in light and life represent the acme of evolutionary material development. On these cultured worlds, gone are the idleness and friction of the earlier primitive ages. Poverty and social inequality have all but vanished. Degeneracy has disappeared, and delinquency is rarely observed. Insanity has practically ceased to exist, and feeble-mindedness is a rarity. The economic, social, and administrative status of these worlds is of a high and perfected order. Science, art, and industry flourish, and society is a smoothly working mechanism of high material, intellectual, and cultural achievement. Industry has been largely diverted to serving the higher aims of such a superb civilization. The economic life of such a world has become ethical. War has become a matter of history, and there are no more armies or police forces. Government is gradually disappearing. Self-control is slowly rendering the laws of human enactment obsolete. The extent of civil government and statutory regulation is in an intermediate state of advancing civilization is in inverse proportion to the morality and spirituality of the citizenship. I think that's a clue that it's possible to get there, so don't be too discouraged. Another one says, there comes a point in population increase where further growth is suicidal. It is a wise nation that knows when to stop growing. How many of you here recognize that Homo sapiens sapiens is a suicidal species? Huh? Most of you. That's good. You need to recognize it before you can do anything about it. Here's another one. While biologic evolution has proceeded ever upward, much of cultural evolution went out from the Euphrates Valley in waves, which successfully weakened as time passed until finally the whole of the pure line Adamic posterity had gone forth to enrich the civilization of Asia and Europe. Now, does that sound a little like Adam's Peace Corps? It does to me. Maybe that's where the Peace Corps idea came from. I don't know. Now, since hybridization is of interest to many of you, let me read a little bit from paper number 82, chapter 6 on racial mixtures. This is in a paper on the evolution of marriage. Let's see. There are no pure races in the world today. The early and original evolutionary peoples of color have only two representative races persisting in the world, the yellow man and the black man, even though these two races are much admixed with the extinct colored peoples. Hybridization of superior and dissimilar stocks is the secret to the creation of new and more vigorous strains. And this is true of plants, animals, and the human species. Hybridization augments vigor and increases fertility. Race mixtures of the average or superior strata of various peoples greatly increase creative potential, as is shown in the present population of the United States and North America. When such matings take place between the lower or inferior strata, creativity is diminished, as is shown in the present-day peoples of southern India. Race blending greatly contributes to the sudden appearance of new characteristics, and if such hybridization is the union of superior strains, then these new characteristics will also be superior traits. Even among inferior stocks, hybrids often are an improvement on their ancestors. Hybridization makes for species improvement because of the role of the dominant genes. Racial intermixture increases the likelihood of a larger number of the desirable dominants being present in the hybrids. One last quote in this part of my talk says, and if I say anything that you ought to write down, these 10 words are it. I see some of you are taking notes. Spiritual insight is a gift. Wisdom must evolve. Revelation has limits. There's a lot of meaning in those 10 words. Spiritual insight is a gift. Wisdom must evolve. Revelation has limits. And I'm sure many, perhaps some in this room, are limited to some of the revelation that I'm presenting right now, or you might find in the Urantia book. That's why I say you need to maintain a large mental whole basket. Globalization changes, or institutional changes in globalization. And I think many of these are economic, environmental, or humanistic. Think about the revolution in communications. We now have worldwide live TV. We've got the internet. We've got USA Today if you want to read the same newspaper that many people across the nation read. Many busy Americans. We've got the International Herald Tribune. If you want to read the same news and views that decision makers in 180 countries read 6 days a week. This is edited in Paris and electronically transmitted to New York in this country, and then it's sent out by airplanes all over the country. Same day, you get the same newspaper around the world. It's amazing. When we watch CNN or the News Hour on PBS, we get frequent examples of globalization of the economy. And I think some people call this merger mania. Then we have excellent magazines like Foreign Affairs and Foreign Policy that address global issues in more depth. Foreign Affairs is published by the Council on Foreign Relations in 27 languages. There are only about 200,000 copies, but 27 languages. This is guidance for the decision makers by our world government. I've been an avid reader of both of those publications for quite some time now, and I highly recommend them, especially Foreign Affairs. And I do have in my briefcase a number of postcards that have their address on it. It's, you know, $44 a year if you want to subscribe to Foreign Affairs. Here's a new flyer I got in the mail recently, Global Outlook. Talks about international business, world economics, trade and investment, and human rights and social policy. Isn't that nice to have that right up there with economics? Huh? It's getting a higher priority among our world leaders now. Is that a rain shower I hear? Or is it air conditioner? Okay. Consider education. I think the U.S. education has educational system has some real problems. But there are some truly world-class programs for Rhodes Scholars and Fulbright Scholars. And I've recently been told that there is a Mellon Institute for truly gifted kids up in Connecticut. And I know somebody attended that, and it's a really interesting story if I have time to tell it. Maybe in the Q&A session if I run out of time here. Somebody will ask about that. World leaders seek the most gifted for world-class training. And I was told that they were monitoring David Adair since he was 9 years old. Y'all know who David Adair is? Oh, what a wonderful story. That's another one I want to tell you in the Q&A session. Somebody asked me who David Adair is, but he won the U.S. Air Force Award for the best scientific achievement when he was 17 years old. His spirit guides gave him the formulas necessary to build a magnetically contained pulsed thermonuclear rocket. He built a rocket at age 17 in Richard Petty's machine shop that his father managed that accelerated faster than anything any world government had ever been able to build. And he impressed the hell out of people. And then the really interesting stuff started in Area 51. He had to get General May to come bail him out of jail when they captured him, when they locked him up in Area 51. Evidence has shown us that there are at least two goals of the alien presence, whether that presence is in physical form or not. And these goals are to raise our environmental concern and our spiritual awareness. What is the effect of this effort? Remember, they consider us as a suicidal species. I think that this effort will help us live long enough to know God better. On the environmental side, most aliens, angels, and world government members want us to, one, eliminate nuclear weapons and other weapons of mass destruction from the face of the earth, to stop polluting the air, land, and the sea, and to stop destroying the lungs of the earth by cutting down the forests. And world government is actually making progress now as aliens and angels help us change our thoughts. We have the outstanding research of the World Watch Institute, who are making a difference in the overriding pollution problem. World Wildlife Fund, the Nature Conservancy, and Earth Justice Legal Defense Fund are gaining in their efforts to counter the destructive materialistic tendencies of many selfish people. They are helping us change the way we view our wonderful natural heritage. I have their addresses on postcards and stuff in my briefcase if anybody wants one. As we join the more advanced galactic society, Many of the changes we need are economic and humanistic. We should lower taxes on things that we want more of, like wages, capital gains, and agricultural property. We should raise taxes on things we want less of, like carbon and sulfur emissions, landfilling, ozone-depleting substances. The humanistic efforts efforts to overcome hunger and disease and war and to raise our spiritual awareness are also increasing rapidly. Among my favorites are the Carter Center. Through their support of Habitat for Humanity, people are making great progress in providing a decent place to live for many who cannot otherwise afford it. They're also trying hard to eliminate several contagious, very contagious diseases currently in isolated areas in Africa. You know, there are more people from all over the world that have to go into Africa now to help them solve their humanitarian and government problems. And that's the potential for spreading those diseases all over the world. It's a serious problem. I heard Carter tell Jim Lehrer that they now have an individual in every little village in Africa capable of administering medicines, etc. For many decades, thank you. For many decades, now CARE has provided food and clothing where the need is great. The International Red Cross fills a great need in turbulent times. Doctors Without Borders provide basic medical care where it's needed most around the world. I think that's a French organization, won the Nobel Peace Prize this year. The UN has become a positive force for keeping peace where it's threatened, and sometimes they fail, normally because they're reluctant to use force. Concerning our spiritual growth, I read one shocking statement in the Urantia book. It said, quote, "Christianity, as secularized and subdivided, is the greatest obstacle to the advancement of human civilization." End quote. But when I gave a lot of thought to that, I said, yeah, you're probably right.
Amen.
The orthodoxy of many religious practices does seem to detract from the spirituality taught by Jesus. The World Council of Churches, since 1948, has been trying to promote cooperation and understanding among all the Christian churches. However, I've noticed that the Dalai Lama is often used by world leaders as a spokesperson for spirituality. And I've got copies of his message to the Millennium Message to the World. If anybody wants one of those, ask me for it in my briefcase. I'm pleased to see that many diverse groups are now promoting an inner awareness of God, promoting a renaissance of spirituality. Besides the Unity Church, some that come to mind are the Institute of Noetic Sciences, the Legion of Goodwill, which I think is probably part of the World Goodwill System, the Spiritual Center of America, Deepak Chopra's Center for Well-Being, and even Harvard Medical Center now hosts weekend courses on spirituality and healing in medicine. I think that's great. We are making progress. And here's one of the flyers that I got in the mail recently. It's called The Soul of Service 2, Building Global Communities of Goodwill, by the Human Service Alliance and the University for Human Goodness. Here's the earth in the middle of a flower that has 12 petals. 12 has been kind of a sacred number for a long time. Surrounded by 24 points of light. And I think those 24 points of light refer to the 24 elders on the council in Jerusalem, whose primary responsibility is managing the evolution of this planet. And I have the names of the people who are on that. Let me mention what the Urantia book says these people are. I'll take some time out of Q&A session if I have to, because this is something that you probably going to want to hear. The first 8 are people that you never heard of their names, but they represent each of the 8 races. They were spiritual leaders from each of the eight races that were put on this planet. And then you got Adam and Eve, Enoch, Moses, Elijah, Micaventa, Melchizedek, and John the Baptist. And one more who is a direct representative of Michael from the local universe headquarters. And then you got 8 slots that are being temporarily filled until contemporary spiritual leaders on this planet now step in to fill those slots as we join the Galactic Society. We need more people who are here now in contemporary times on it. I think all of these efforts are helping us transform to what Ra called fourth density society, where our reason for being is to develop unconditional love of others. Now, changes in our physical bodies. It seems to me that both creation and evolution are part of our history. The latest changes in our physical bodies seem to be taking place with the help of many people that I know, perhaps some of you. Apparently, people with good genes are chosen to upgrade. And I know personally over 85 people who appear to be involved in this hybridization program. And they are handsome service to others people. I mentioned George Robinson, so I'll skip that. You know, he talked about eugenics, according to Webster's Dictionary in 53, means the science which deals with influences that improve inborn or hereditary qualities of a race or breed, especially the human species. And Robinson said, our engineered descendants will be different. They will be more adapted to living off the planet. They will give humanity greater survivability. He mentioned extending our sixth sense through the use of our tools of technology. Same paragraph, he talked about, quote, the biotechnological, consciously directed evolution of Homo sapiens sapiens into a new species. I want to share with you part of paper number 72 of the Urantia book. No. This program that Robinson said we did requires greater knowledge of the human genome than our scientists admit to having. And I don't know how many of you have been following the Human Genome Project, but what's going on in the public domain is very, very rapid. And the reason it's so rapid is because it's been done already by other people, in my opinion. I think it's the diversity of consciousness of people on the planet that requires secrecy of such a program to be successful. And I suspect that this knowledge comes from the same source that has been upgrading our genes for 1 million years. Now, a lot of people complain about the U.S. government kind of stonewalling on this issue, but can you imagine Bill Clinton getting up there on the television to the world and saying, yeah, I know that we've got a joint program with the aliens and we're picking up your daughters in the middle of the night, sometimes hijacking them off the road, and we take their eggs and we insert altered eggs, and then 3.5 months later we pick them up again and we take the fetuses, and if they look, because they're going to look different from you, and we raise them in underground and undersea bases, and they just wouldn't fit in with you. He can't do that. He can't do that. If it's a standard government, I was in the government 26 years working with top secret damn near every day. And if you got a secret you really want to keep, you don't admit you got a secret. That's all there is to it. So, don't beat him up so bad just because he won't. I think anybody is pretty damn dumb if they look to any elected leader for their truth anyway.
Right.
So, okay. Now I want to share with you part of paper number 72 of the Urantia book. And I really don't have time to go through this, so you're just going to have to do this yourself. But this is on government on a neighboring planet.
Oh, wow.
And it's given to us to give us ideas that we might use as we evolve. So I'm going to just talk about this. They talk about a continental nation where this continent has a big mountain in the middle, or all the mountains in the middle, and the rains come, and they divide it into 100 different groups around, and they use irrigation on the west side, and they're separated from the lesser evolved, more materialistic society outside. They have a democratic system, but they only have one term for their leaders. There's a lot of stuff in there I really wanted to share with you, but I don't have time, unfortunately, because these are good ideas that we need to all get. The political organization, they have 3 houses. They have a legislative division, they have an upper house and a lower house and a third house, which, let me read you what it says about the third house, keeping in mind the Council on Foreign Relations, which everybody in here knows, right, is the U.S. branch of the world government we've been living under since 1921, 79 years, okay? It's about 3,000 some people. The third house, the elder statesman, embraces the veterans of civic service and includes many distinguished persons nominated by the chief executive, by the regional sub-federal executives, by the chief of the Supreme Tribunal, by the presiding officers of either of the other legislative houses. This group is limited to 100, and its members are elected by the majority action of the elder statesmen themselves. I think that's the way the council works. Membership is for life, and when vacancies occur, the person receiving the largest ballot among the list nominees is thereby duly elected. The scope of this body is purely advisory, but it is mighty regulator of public opinion and exerts a powerful influence upon all branches of the government. I think that's true of the CFR too. It talks about, parental courts and educational courts and industrial courts, and, you've got to be qualified to raise kids. The average number of kids per family on this planet is 5, but you got to be highly qualified to get the opportunity to do that. It talks about the home life, the educational system,